There is a story from the Old Testament that, to be honest, is one of the most disturbing in the entire Bible. Some might even consider it to be the worst event in Scripture. This episode can be found in chapters 19 through 21 of the book of Judges. Many people are familiar with the passage from chapter 19, but few continue reading until the end. I believe this story, although disturbing, offers valuable lessons that we need to understand. Let's explore this narrative in detail and then reflect on the teachings that we can draw from it. Let's turn to Judges 19 verse 1. In those days, Israel lived without a king, and there was a Levite who lived in a mountainous region in Ephraim. He took as a concubine a woman from Bethlehem in Judah. It's important to note that the Levite lived in the north, while the woman was from the south. After a while, this woman became unfaithful and returned to her father's home in Bethlehem, where she stayed for approximately 4 years. During the months when he learned that she had returned to her father's home, the Levite decided to follow her. He traveled from Ephraim to the south, to Bethlehem, determined to bring her back. When he arrived, he was warmly received by the woman's father, who welcomed him with hospitality. Several times, the Levite tried to leave with his wife, but his father-in-law insisted that he stay one more night. This situation repeated until, after several days, the Levite decided that it was time to leave. He thanked him for his hospitality and set out on the return journey with the woman. However, the return trip took a tragic turn when they crossed the territory traveling from the south of Israel towards the north. They arrived near the city of Jebus. The servant suggested that they spend the night there, but the Levite refused, preferring to go to Jah, where he expected to be welcomed by an Israelite. When they arrived in Jah, no one offered them shelter. Unexpectedly, given the importance of hospitality in Israelite culture, at dusk, an elderly man found them in the square and, learning that they had nowhere to stay, invited them to his home. The Levite accepted the offer immediately, assuring the host that they had provisions and only needed a place to rest. They settled in and appeared to be safe, but then something terrible happened. A group of men from the city surrounded the house, demanding that the Levite be handed over to them, so they could abuse him. This act of perversion and violence reveals the degraded state of Jah. In a strange gesture, the host tried to pacify the men by offering them his own daughter and the Levite's concubine, to prevent them from attacking his guest. When the men rejected the offer, the Levite, in desperation, handed his concubine over to them. The men raped her all night long. At dawn they released her, and she, gravely injured, managed to return to the door of the Levite's house. The following morning, upon opening the door, the Levite found his concubine collapsed on the threshold. He called out to her to get up and continue the journey, but she did not respond. He realized that she had lost her life after a night of abuse. In a shocking act, he placed her body on his donkey and continued his way back home. When he arrived, he made a difficult decision. He divided the woman's body into 12 parts and sent each part to the different tribes of Israel, drawing attention to the atrocity committed by his own people. The tribe of Benjamin was particularly affected by this act, and the event had significant consequences for the entire nation. The tribes were horrified by what had happened, something unprecedented since the Exodus from Egypt. Indignation and confusion filled the people as they gathered to discuss how to respond to this tragedy. This event led to a civil war between the tribes of Israel and the tribe of Benjamin, resulting in thousands of deaths on both sides. The episode left a lasting impression on the nation, serving as a reminder of the importance of justice and compassion in society. The story ended with the tribe of Benjamin almost wiped out, leaving only 600 men. Faced with this situation, the other tribes began to fear that one of their own tribes would disappear without women to marry and perpetuate their lineage. The continuity of Benjamin was threatened, so the tribes devised a solution. They attacked a clan and took 400 women to give to the men of Benjamin. Even so, 200 more men remained without wives. To resolve this issue, the Israelites came up with another controversial solution. During a festival, they allowed the men of Benjamin to abduct women to marry, which technically would not break the vow of the tribes not to give their daughters to the Benjaminites. These episodes reinforce the impact of wrong decisions and how one bad decision can lead to others that are equally tragic. The consequences of the choices made by Israel directly affected innocent lives which had nothing to do with the evil acts that. The events that triggered this war should serve as a reminder of some important lessons. The first lesson is that a lack of responsibility can lead to serious mistakes. The opening verse, which states that there was no king in Israel at the time, illustrates how the absence of leadership and accountability can result in disorderly and morally corrupt behavior among the people. When there is no one in charge, we tend to make impulsive decisions without considering the consequences. The second lesson is the importance of treating everyone with dignity. The account of the host offering his own daughter and concubine as protection for his guest reminds us that each person bears the image of God. This example emphasizes the need to honor the worth and dignity of others and avoid objectifying or dehumanizing them. Finally, the third lesson highlights the danger of drifting away from God. It is essential to maintain a strong connection with our spiritual values and beliefs in order to avoid making decisions that are contrary to our moral principles. The book of Judges illustrates Israel's gradual decline as they deviated from divine principles, culminating in the final chapters. This decay reflects how distance from God can lead to unimaginable consequences. The farther we drift from God, the more vulnerable we become to error. Another lesson is that the consequences of bad choices are inevitable and often have a greater impact than we can imagine. Although the sin committed by the Benjamites was horrific, the decision of the tribes to retaliate resulted in the death of numerous innocents and widespread suffering. Every decision we make has consequences that we cannot fully control. Even in the midst of failure and destruction, we see a manifestation of God's grace. Despite the severe consequences, God allowed the tribe of Benjamin to rebuild, and Israel restructured itself after these events. The final phrase of the book of Judges summarizes the entire story. In those days when all these things had happened, the Lord raised up judges. During the days when there was no king in Israel, each person acted according to their own conscience. May we learn the significance of our decisions, knowing that each choice carries a lasting consequence.